Yeah, the reason I was so hyped for 3 is because I was like, I gotta see this through to the end. Kingdom Hearts has been part of my life for like 16 years. I gotta see this through to the end. So I was
Little
like,
did you know, here we would be talking about Kingdom Hearts 4, TJ. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us here on another steaming hot edition of Cup of Joe's. I'm your host, Joe Brown. I'm joined by my best friend, Joe Parian, and we are also joined by our guest, TJ, or PsyJ, as he's known on the internet, as a Twitch streamer, speedrunner, Pokemon player, judge, tournament organizer, and Kingdom Hearts extraordinaire. Kingdom Hearts, I guess, lore, gameplay, whatever extraordinaire. So TJ, we brought you on because we had the groundbreaking news today, an emergency episode we needed to record. Kingdom Hearts 4 is real, and you were the first person we thought of to come on the podcast. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. It's kind of a surreal day for people like you and me who waited 13 years for Kingdom Hearts 3 and be like, well, yeah, I guess 4 will eventually be made in 2060, we'll get around to it. And now we're like, oh, there's a real trailer. Oh, well, this is a real thing that's happening. Okay, that's cool. Neat.
And it's not too bad, right? It's like a 3-year difference, right?
Kingdom Hearts 3 was 2019, I think.
That's what I think it was. I think it was January
I think it was
2019.
Yeah, it was right after Dallas.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So
yeah, it was the week after Dallas. I remember I took a day off work to finish the game. I stayed up all night playing it, and it was 5 in the morning, and I'm like, I gotta go to work tomorrow. I'm just gonna text my boss and be like, I'm sick, and then just stayed up and finished the game. I was like, I can't do this.
Man, you know what they should have done when Kingdom Hearts 3 came out, like they did with Fallout 4, is the company made a thing for you to print out, a fake doctor's note to give your job to tell them that you were sick, so you could play Fallout 4.
Oh God!
See, Joe, that's how you know life a game. Joe always judges me when I spend 26 of 34 hours playing Spider-Man. And he was like, "Oh," and I was like, "No, that's how you do it."
No. I do not judge you. I envy you. Because I can't do that. Remember? There's never any judgment. It's more like, man, I wish I could do that.
Print out the Fallout 4 doctor's note. You could do it. Bada bing, bada boom.
That's not the problem. But anyway,
I think Adam put it best on the last time he was on your guys' show, where he said, I'm getting up there in years, and these video games aren't going to play themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so Joe, obviously you're not a big fan of Kingdom Hearts, you haven't played it, but we sat here and we watched through the trailers with you. So first, we don't need to care about the 2 games. Maybe TJ and I can talk about that, but let's start with
We'll just
your
quickly
opinion.
go through them. One is the conclusion to Dark Road, which is Xehanort's backstory, and the other one is some new mobile game. So that's basically it. You don't need to know anything else.
Yeah, we were told mobile games don't matter to the plot, and then Nomura literally
actually
lied
just the
to
biggest
our
lie
faces.
in history.
So Joe, as the Kingdom Hearts novice who just watched the reveal trailer for Kingdom Hearts 4, let's start with you. Let's get your opinion out there on what you saw.
I looked at a picture that was on Twitter comparing Sora's image across the games at the moment, and they're just really going for this hyper-realistic look for Sora, which is confusing to me. Because let me see what he looks like again. He looks way too
real,
like a real person to me.
He looks like a guy you'd meet on the street.
Yeah, he looks like
or
if I'm
someone
walking...
at an anime con or something.
Like Uncanny
trying to spike
Valley,
their hair.
Joe?
Huh?
Like an Uncanny Valley sense, almost too real, and it makes you feel uncomfortable. Do you know that phenomenon? There was a movie.
I do. Oh yeah. A little bit, but no. It's just I guess here's a comparison of it. It's they're just trying to make him look like too real of a person. I enjoyed when he looked more like a cartoon character, in my opinion. Like, I understand that I guess this is a conversation about just the gaming world in general. Is we're really trying to get into these graphical settings that make it look like we're playing as real people in real worlds, where I'm just kind of like, why can't I just play as like a cartoon bunny just running around kicking things in a cartoon world? Like, I don't need... if I want to play in the real world, I'll go outside. Like...
So, the problem I have with that is that, like, I do think, like, it's cool to see, like, how far graphics have come in a couple years, because, like, you go back... I remember I went back and I played Ocarina of Time on the Virtual Console, and I was like, wow, this is...
That's something.
This is not what I remembered as a kid.
Oh, no, yeah.
I can count the polygons.
And now I've seen... Yeah, now I'm, like, looking at it, and I'm like, man, this looks gorgeous. But then you have people who expect that in, like, all gaming, and you have the people who are like, oh my god, Legends Arceus isn't, like, hyper-realistic. And I'm like, it's not supposed to be. Like, that's the art style. Like, that's just what it is. And I'm not saying Legends Arceus is, like, top-tier graphical quality. Like, it's... Game probably could have used another 3 months in the oven. But
so hold on. Let me explain this.
When you look at something like this for like Kingdom Hearts 4, it's like this feels a little out of place, especially like even with 3 where they were using Unreal Engine 4. You're like, this feels very different.
So let's explain why it looks that way. So for Joe and for anyone else, so they say they're in the Kingdom Hearts. The new Kingdom Hearts takes place in the city of Quadratum. And if you remember at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3, Sora is hanging out, everybody at Destiny Islands, all having a great ball because they won. They beat Xehanort. And then him and Kyrie are off to the side, and then he just like disintegrates in thin air and just dies. And everyone's like, what? And then in the post-credit thing or whatever, he goes to Quadratum. We didn't know what it was called at the time, which was a hyper-realistic, hyper-realized Japanese city. So the drawings are different, and you know how like and how the Kingdom Hearts characters take on different outfits depending on which Disney universe they go into. Like Nightmare Before Christmas, he has like the Jack Skellington outfit. Lion King, he's turned into a lion and stuff like that. So that's why he looks so hyper realistic. Is because they're straight up in Japan in this universe. So that's why the graphics are like that.
Yeah. Someone on Reddit had a theory that like, what if during the game when you're in like Sora's perspective, we're going to have this like hyper realistic like graphics, and that's what it's just going to look like. But then when we go back to like cutscenes for like Donald and Goofy and Riku and all the other people who are looking for Sora, because they've been looking for Sora since Sora disappeared at the end of 3, it'll go back to like what we are used to in
I agree.
Kingdom Hearts 3.
It kind of did that.
I think so.
At the end. Yeah, it was very close. I believe it was like their Kingdom Hearts 3 models, like rendered from Unreal Engine, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Okay, so maybe I'm wrong in my statement. So that would be pretty cool if that's the plan, to hop back and forth between the two, kind of like
they kind of separate, put like a barrier between like this
and show
is
that
what's going on with Sora,
because this is the afterlife or whatever they call it in the trailer. Like he's not alive anymore. Is what what's her name? Sterlitzia?
Sterlitzia.
Yeah, that's essentially
one of the most important characters in the Kingdom Hearts universe, and she is an optional cutscene that you can miss in Kingdom Hearts 3. So
what makes her important?
So she is a character from like the Age of Fairy Tales, which was from the mobile games that Nomura said would not actually matter for the story. That's a whole other discussion. But
just for everybody who's listening and wasn't part of the pre-show, he said this more than like 7 times at this point. Both him and Joe Brown have
because we're still upset about it. He lied.
Yeah, so Nomura specifically said you would not have to play the mobile games to understand the story of Kingdom Hearts 3.
And
for the most part, he was right. Except for the part in the Keyblade Graveyard where all these characters show up and you have no clue what's going on, because if you skip the mobile games, you wouldn't know who any of these people are. You wouldn't know who Sterlitzia is, and it's one of the most important cutscenes in the game because they explain certain things that have been going on in the background, and if you didn't play the mobile games, you're just sitting there like, oh, okay, that's cool.
But even more importantly, what he does is the people who had the highest ranking scores or ratings or whatever in the mobile games were cemented in Kingdom Hearts 3. They had their names at the end of that fight, that's what I'm more upset about, because if I knew
I would have played.
Exactly, and they would have made even more money. I would have whaled that game so hard if I could have had my character.
No idea how much I would have whaled it.
Right. So that's what I'm upset about. CJ cares more about the story integrity of it, but I care about that I could have been in Kingdom Hearts 3.
Yeah, Sterilitzia is so as far as like her character goes, she is Larium's brother. Larium was one of the dandelions, so he was the leader of one of the groups of Keyblade wielders who were rebuilding the world after the Keyblade War. Larium is Marluxia, who is the final boss of Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, Rechain of Memories, and one of the 13 Darknesses in Kingdom Hearts 3.
Dope as hell.
Yes, and she is his sister, who was mysteriously killed, and no one knows who her assailant was. Nobody knows who killed her. And that's kind of like her backstory, how she ended up in Quadratum, which is explained a little bit further in Melody of Memory, but to be perfectly honest, I didn't play Melody of Memory because the game is like, I don't know, it's like 15 something hours, and you can watch all of the new cutscenes on YouTube in under an hour. It was like 58 minutes of like new content. So
I wouldn't even say
that's just what I did.
I know the video is an hour, but I really wouldn't even say it's legitimately maybe 15 minutes of significant cutscenes for a $60 game.
Oh, significant? Yes. Like the last 15 minutes is what matters, where they go to the final world and talk to Sterlitzia. That's like the only important scene in that whole thing. Well, I'd say the part with Ansem the Wise is kind of important too, where he explains the differences between the worlds.
So let me read the press release from Square about Kingdom Hearts 4. So it says, Sora makes a triumphant return with an updated look at the beginning of an epic new storyline titled The Lost Master Arc, beginning with Sora facing off in a boss battle against a giant enemy. Players are introduced to the Quadratum, a large, expansive city set in a gorgeous, realistic world unlike anything ever seen before in the Kingdom Hearts series. Fans will be excited to see the return of Sora's well-known companions, Donald and Goofy, in addition to the first appearance of Sterilitzia, a mysterious new character who appears before Sora in this strange new setting. So, does that make you think that the large chunk of the game is going to be in Quadratum? Like, we're not going to be world hopping, we're going to mostly be in this city?
So,
never mind.
So it's interesting because this is a numbered game, and in the numbered games, we pretty much follow Sora exclusively.
Right.
So I don't. In the trailer, someone actually pointed this out in the trailer. That little I know you don't really believe it, but it looks a little suspicious to me.
I'll show the photo to Joe. He can see.
Yeah, it looks a little sussy to me, but in that forest area, someone on Reddit says that there is a ATST foot.
Here you go, Joe.
In the forest, which would tell me that we might be going to Disney Worlds, and I don't know how we're gonna do this hyper realistic thing with Sora. I guess if we're gonna go to Star Wars worlds or Marvel worlds, it would make sense.
But does it even make sense logistically? If you're gonna add Star Wars, would it make sense to start with Episode 6? You know what I mean? It just doesn't seem like it makes sense to me.
Well, because
then you're only getting
Kingdom Hearts 3. We skipped Pirates of the Caribbean 2.
No, right, but that's different than starting with Pirates of the Caribbean 5 and then going back to 1 afterwards. That. What I'm saying is, if you start on Endor and in Return of the Jedi, that's all you can do with Luke Skywalker in that universe, because that story's over. You can't go to another world where Luke is now 18 again, because he wouldn't remember the interactions with Sora. It'd be even too crazy for Nomura to do. That's what I'm saying.
I don't think anything is too crazy for Nomura to do at this point.
That'd be like going with how in Birth by Sleep, Hercules was the teenager, still wasn't strong, and then now in the as time passed on, now Hercules became big and strong and the real Hercules. That'd be like if you then in the future go back to like Hercules as a kid. Like it just wouldn't make sense because like Hercules is now an adult. Like time has progressed in that universe. Anyway, let's ask Joe. What do you think of the foot? I just showed you the photo of it in the trailer.
Well, my idea from what you guys are kind of talking about is we can kind of, if like they do what you're saying, like what episode of Star Wars would they be starting off at?
6, which is the last Luke Skywalker one.
Okay, so that's when Luke starts to become, like, Yoda's gone, like the universe is saved at this point, so Luke starts becoming like a Jedi like trainer and stuff. He starts looking into doing that. So maybe this could be a thing where like you become an apprentice to Luke and you learn the way of a Jedi, get the lightsaber keyblade, blah blah blah, stuff like that. Like that's like an idea they could go with. But my overall idea of what could be going on in the game, somewhat similar to what The Last of Us 2 did, but maybe in a better way, where well, I guess it's a little different from what The Last of Us 2 did. Like, we keep jumping. We do storyline with Sora and what's going on with Sora and him trying to figure out where to go and trying to figure out what to do. And then we jump to Donald and Goofy trying to find Sora and, like, kind of, like, working our way that way. Which could be an interesting thing to do and would be even more, I guess, climactic when they met back up. Because you were helping them in both directions, if that makes sense. But I don't think they could do that for very long for it to stick to the original plan of what the games are based off of going. I think maybe that would be more of a large tutorial portion in the front of the game, if that makes sense.
I don't know. It just seems too far-fetched to me. Like, I can see a world where there is a Star Wars universe. The other thing that I was thinking, like, remember how Woody was supposed to be a summon in Kingdom Hearts 1 and then they like scrapped it. So you would have
like his model's still in the game.
Right, you would have had a Toy Story representative without a Toy Story world. Like, I can imagine having Star Wars enemies or characters and things, like having an AT-AT as a villain. Like, it got taken over by a Heartless or something like that. Without actually
it's like a
doing
boss.
Luke Skywalker
it's like a boss fight or something. Yeah, and I can see them doing something like that. I think, like, a really cool idea they could go off of is that while we're in Quadratum, we kind of explore worlds that would fit in the real world. Like, we don't know, obviously Star Wars is like a fantasy story, but it could happen. Maybe it's really did happen in like a galaxy far away in like the real world.
You know what would be kind of interesting? So what's this place called again? The
Quadratum.
Quadratum, and that's like where people that have died.
Afterlife, yeah.
Afterlife. How interesting would it be if the worlds they put in here are the worlds they left on the cutting room floor of the other games?
That could work.
Like,
I can see that.
So that would be like a really cool concept idea that they could do. It's like, well, we were gonna put but then the graphics to those time periods stayed with it, you know? So like they go to a world from Kingdom Hearts 1 that got scrapped, and all of a sudden we get dialed down in graphics to Kingdom Hearts 1. I think that'd be a really cool use of like graphical like imagery and stuff.
I would really like that, especially if they're going to do that one theory where while we're in Quadratum, which is the real world, Sora's like hyper realistic and everything looks like Final Fantasy 15 graphics. And whenever we flash back to like Donald and Goofy, we're, at Kingdom Hearts cartoony like graphics.
Hold on, guys. I just figured it out. I literally just cracked the code right here.
Were you on the phone with Square?
Yeah, I was texting them real quick.
Good.
I know it's like 5 a.m. or something, but
can you ask him if I have to play the mobile games?
Yeah.
He says you have to.
Okay, so let's talk gameplay for a second. Not the Versus 13 stuff, what TJ and I will get to, but the actual gameplay of the thing. The new mechanic introduced is a grappling hook, right? That he uses, and he's shooting around, and we know that that's obviously going to be a significant mechanic, just like how flow motion was introduced in Dream Drop and then made like perfected in 3 and whatever. So this grappling hook, I just thought of it. You know what it also kind of feels like when he's touching it, or when he's using it? A
What?
web slinging.
Oh,
Marvel.
Oh God.
Marvel, baby. We're getting
What if
Spider-Man
he's
in
not-
Kingdom Hearts.
What if he's not in Japan and he's actually in New York City?
No,
my
he's in
God.
Japan.
What happens if he has to meet up with J. Jonah Jameson?
Spider-Man is actually very popular in Japan, so it would actually make a lot of sense for them to do this. And if
What
you're
happens if Joe
going
Brown is
to
in
introduce, bro, I could have been if Nomura told me to play the freaking mobile game. I could have been, but
I'm just saying, like, what happens if he's like web slinging around, and all of a sudden Joe Brown's like, "Hey, you're that Sora Spider-Man guy. Do a flip, like in that Marvel movie. You know the one."
I'm just saying, if they're going to add Star Wars, that means they're open to adding Marvel too, and that grapple hook looks like you could also make that look like he's hooking through a city the way that Spider-Man slings through a city, or swings through a city.
So, during Nomura did an interview like right after 3 came out, and he said like during development, Disney said you have free reign. You can take any property you want, including the stuff we've recently acquired, like Marvel, Star Wars, etc. And Nomura was like, I don't think they're gonna fit. Like, I know people really want, the whole, Sora versus Darth Vader secret boss fight, which you can't tell me that wouldn't be exciting.
That would be awesome.
But yeah, that will be sick. But Nomura was like, I don't think these are gonna fit in like the idea that I have for the game, but maybe somewhere down the road. I think he said he was allowed to go all the way up to Moana, as far as like Disney properties went.
Right,
Oh my
which-
God, having the Rock in a Kingdom Hearts game? What?
Oh my God, that'd be amazing.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, he was allowed to go. The movies he was allowed to go all the way up to was Moana. So I believe
That's
that might have
pretty
been
much
the most
everything.
recent.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the time, and I think like he was privy to
yeah.
like stuff that was coming down the pipe at Disney, but they were like, you can't touch this yet.
Right.
Oh, you can't.
So
put
he
a
so he
Coco
was
in
pretty much
there?
allowed the entirety of the Disney library.
Oh my God.
You can put Coco
including-
in there?
Oh, Coco!
Coco would be an awesome world,
And it's about
Coco
the
would be
afterlife,
awesome.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Coco would be a sick world. And they've kind of embraced the whole. I mean, how many Pixar games were in 3? How many Pixar movies were in 3?
A good chunk.
There's Toy Story, Monsters. Maybe that was it actually.
That had to be
could-
something else.
Frozen.
Oh wait, no,
wasn't
Wreck-It Ralph
Pixar.
is regular Disney, right? That's not Pixar. Wreck-It Ralph.
No, Wreck-It Ralph is.
like regular
I think that's
Disney.
just Disney. I don't
Right.
think it's Pixar.
the way that like Frozen's just regular Disney. That's not Pixar. So it could just have been those two Pixar. I'm sure we are going to get more Pixar things in the future, like
Yeah,
The
Wreck-It Ralph was
Incredibles
Walt
or something
Disney
like that.
Animation Studios.
And then Big Hero 6, is that Pixar or is that regular Disney?
that's.
Regular
I
Disney.
think that's regular Disney.
Okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like a Pixar story.
No, yeah. Do you think? No, because you already said it was up to. But Moana came out so long ago.
But this game started development in like 2011, 2012, right? So
Kingdom Hearts
Yeah, we
Moana-
got our first.
No, Kingdom Hearts 3. He's
Oh, we're
TJ's talking about
Kingdom-
Nomura was told he has free reign on anything up to Moana, which I believe was 2016 or 2015 or something like that. So if
Yeah.
you think
I
about it, that really is as current as possible in that timeline for him developing.
Okay,
the
yeah.
game.
I thought we were talking about Kingdom Hearts 4 for a second.
No,
I'm
no,
sorry.
Yeah, Moana was 2016, and he
Right.
was obviously he chose Frozen for Kingdom Hearts 3, much to the dismay
Which
of.
is great. Shut up.
Love but
it.
which
me.
that was 2013,
Hold on,
so
hold on,
he
hold
was
on.
given free reign and said like you can pick anything. We have to sign off on it, but we're just going to give you free reign and you can pretty much pick whatever you want. And he decided like, okay, well this is what I'm going to pick. And I think he said like up to Moana was where he was allowed to that was where like his line was drawn.
Were you gonna say something, Joe? I thought you had something to say.
I was going to say, do we have to throw him off the podcast if he's going to talk about Frozen like that?
Yeah. I also think he was given
So
free reign.
I'm not. It's not that I don't like Frozen. I don't see like all the hype around it. Like everybody that was like, "Oh my god, it's better than Lion King," and I'm like,
Okay, well,
I
hold on
don't
a
know
minute.
about that.
Hold on.
I don't know
think
about all
everybody
that.
is. Maybe you're like maybe the Florida man on bath salts that told you it's better than Lion King is wrong, but that doesn't mean that because it's not better than Lion King.
I'm not saying
means
it's a
not
bad
good.
movie. I didn't really understand all the hype around it, where everyone was like, "Oh, it's like Disney's greatest movie ever. It's better than Lion King," and I'm like,
What
all
I
right,
think
I'm not
happened-
saying it's bad, but it's not up there.
What I think happened was they put Nomura in a room and they gave him a photo of all of the Disney movies and like, you have this time where you go all the way up to Moana and they're like, you could do anything, the world's your oyster, you could, we're not going to ask you at all. And as they're talking, they just slowly but surely bump the photo of Frozen closer and closer to
They
Nomura.
just keep sliding it
Because
to
it's
him,
like, oh, this
you
movie,
really want
you
this
could use
one.
any of these movies. This movie made $1 billion, but it's your choice.
It's your choice. Oh, I see you're not picking up the Frozen photo. Here, let me put it in your hand. That might actually help a little bit. I will say though, did you guys see Frozen 2? I would assume you
No,
did.
I didn't
I've
see
yet
it,
to
no.
see it.
I will say I think Frozen 2 would actually set itself for a phenomenal Kingdom Hearts world. Frozen 2 was a fantastic movie. Like
I
it
thought
was really, really good.
Wasn't
And
the gecko from that movie in Kingdom Hearts?
No,
Three-
are you thinking
Kingdom
of
Hearts?
No.
Are you thinking of Tangled, the frog or gecko?
Yeah, you're thinking of Tangled.
But there is a gecko in Kingdom Hearts in Frozen 2, right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
see it.
I don't
there
think
is.
so.
There definitely is.
I don't know, man.
it.
I think he's like bluish purple or something, right? I think I know what Joe's talking about. Yeah, because I got my little cousin that told when she was like.
Oh, is
4
this
years
like
old.
the Heartless at the end?
No, he's talking about Frozen 2, the film. There's a
Oh,
little like gecko guy who I don't know if he.
oh I haven't
changes
seen
colors.
Frozen 2 in so long.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been a while. I got
This
my
boy.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, I know who you're talking about now. All right, I
Yes.
remember this.
Wasn't he in Kingdom Hearts 3?
He's blue, yeah. No, you're thinking of the
I don't think
green
he
guy
was.
that is the Tangled lady's friend in Tangled. That guy is in it. The little green guy.
Yeah, no, I know that.
Because
That's
Frozen 2
who
was.
in Tangled, in Kingdom Hearts. Because Frozen 2 was like recent. That was like what 20.
Yeah, Frozen 2 was
2020 or
2019, I think. Yeah, 2019.
Yeah.
So this was the year Kingdom Hearts 3 came out. So there was no way this was going to be
And
in
it came
Kingdom
out
Hearts 3.
after Kingdom Hearts 3. It was the
Yeah.
winter of 2019.
Kingdom Hearts was probably finishing up like QA and going to like final checks when this was like Disney was getting ready to put this
All right,
in.
hold on. Let's get
Start
back on.
promoting
Let's
this.
get back on track here. You guys kind of blew over my Marvel Spider-Man thing. I think it's a great thing, but whatever. Let's get back on track. This
We purposely did.
section, this storyline is titled "The Lost Master Arc." So the previous arc was the Xehanort arc, or Xehanort Saga, where he was the master, behind the puppet strings or whatever for the whole thing. So Lost Master, we know throughout different storylines, he was like this dude who a bajillion years ago was in charge of stuff, and he had this box, and then he had his assistant Lushu, who we didn't know was actually Zigbar or whatever. He was in charge of controlling this box because the box, like Pandora's box, essentially has the whole
For those
fate
of you
the
who have
world.
never played, by the way, for those of you who have never played Kingdom Hearts before, this is all real.
This is
Joe is
real.
not making this up.
So
Yeah,
Like
those
this
are
sounds
real
really
words.
convoluted,
the
but
master, so for Joe and for anyone else listening, the master knows he's gonna die or purposely dies or something, and puts Lushu in charge of the box with all the power in the universe and a keyblade that has his eye in it, so you can watch over it, whatever, not stuff. But so he is now in the afterlife. He is in Quadratum with Sora. So that's how we are going to have the antagonist in the game, because he's going to be in the same place as Sora. So TJ, what do you think the fact that this is now the Lost Master arc? Like, what are your first thoughts as to how the storyline's going to go out? Like, do you think it's going to be another 5-game arc, or like is it going to be settled here? Like, what are your thoughts when you hear it's the Lost Master arc?
so during the DLC for Kingdom Hearts 3, there's a cutscene, I believe it's right at the beginning, where young Xehanort comes out of a portal. He's wearing the black coat, And there's another guy with a black coat sitting on a rock, and he's like, "Oh, he's like, how was it? How was your journey?" And Xehanort's like, "Ah, it's all great. Like, I really feel like I'm supposed to wear this coat and all that." And the guy he's talking to is the Master of Masters, who is the guy who's kind of been pulling all the strings in the background. If you didn't play the mobile game, you'd have no clue who this guy is. Shout outs to Nomura. And he says at the end, because Xehanort's like, "Hey, who are you? Like, what's your name?" He's like, "Are you some kind of like fortune teller or something?" And he gives him like this really like convoluted like thing where he's like, "Oh, hey, the truth is what you see with your eyes, not what you hear." He gives him like this like riddle, and Xehanort's like, "Yeah, that's cool, but like, what's your name?" And then he tells him his name, but it gets blanked out. There's like a flash of light, so we as the viewer don't hear it. And at the end, he says, "I'm a lost master," and then he leaves. So I'm guessing this whole thing is going to be the Master of Masters story, and there's so many theories regarding this guy and what he does and who he is. And he wrote a book called the Book of Prophecies, which is everything that will ever happen ever. And from what Lushu says, everything he's written has come to pass. So he clearly knows the future. He clearly knows what's going to happen. Was Sora dying all part of this plan, or did Sora mess something up and now he's got to fix it? Like, this is what the story is going to be. It's going to be the Master of Masters
Sora
backstory.
to go there because he needed it. Because remember, at the end of the game, it's not like Sora got stabbed and died. He just straight up disintegrates and like goes into the other world, the afterlife. You know what I mean? So it's not like he died.
And it's said that Sora disappeared because he abused the laws of nature. Like, you can't use the power of waking to just do whatever you want, because he used it to bring Kairi back. And there was a terrible price to pay, which is what Xehanort said to him during the story. Like, there will be a terrible price to pay if you do this. And now he's quote unquote dead, or in the afterworld, or Quadratum, or whatever Kingdom Hearts' thing is for dying.
Yeah.
Whatever their euphemism is. But the thing that makes the Master of Masters interesting, and if you watched Kingdom Hearts back cover, which is a special like hour-long movie that comes with 2.8, that kind of explains like a little bit of the backstory, like before the Keyblade War, that kind of talks about the Master of Masters and all that. He gives all of his apprentices a task. And Lushu's task, who Lushu ends up being Xigbar, was to watch everybody from a distance, keep an eye on my Keyblade. It has my eye in it so I can see the future, and take care of this box. Don't ever open the box. I'll tell you what's in it, but don't ever open it. We as the viewer do not know what's in the box. Okay. Nomura has said that he has left enough clues in the games to tell you what's in the box, but for all we know, it could be a cutscene that just meant absolutely nothing, and it just tells everything. So knowing, looking back, it was pretty obvious Xigbar was Lushu. Like, it's really obvious how none of us like ever figured it out, but it could be something like that, yeah, he's left the tails, but we're not going to be able to figure it out until we actually find out what's in it. We're like, oh yeah, that scene in 2 is what told us what was in it.
Okay, so hold on.
And
do you think he's going to be the full antagonist? Like, obviously it's the Lost Master arc, right? And so the first one was the Xehanort arc, and he was the big bad guy throughout. Because there's kind of, how do I explain this? Like, I kind of have this like inclination, and I could be dead wrong, and he could very well be the main bad guy who's trying to destroy the world and everything. But the way his character plays out through the movies and the games is like, he's almost like playfully enjoying watching the outcome of how things of his plan is working, and it's not necessarily malicious as it is curious. If I'm explaining it, like, I hope I'm making sense to you.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Like, so it doesn't necessarily mean like he's the big bad villain that wants to destroy the universe, and it's more like he wants to soak chaos into the world and just like watch what happens. Yeah, and there's a theory online that
and I'll explain how this all works here in a minute. This is very, very convoluted, but it makes sense at the end. That Kingdom Hearts is actually a time loop. This whole story is a time loop. And the Master of Masters has been through this multiple times. And that's how he was able to write the Book of Prophecies, because he's been through the time loop multiple times. He knows what's going to happen, so he can use his knowledge to get to an ending that he actually wants. He rounds up his 5 apprentices, or his 6 apprentices. I keep forgetting about Lushu, because Lushu's, he's his own thing.
Right.
And he tells them, he's like, hey, I'm going to give you each in a task. One is tasked with keeping watch over the other apprentices. The other one is supporting the leader. There's another one that's charged with, getting Keyblade wielders. There's another one whose task was uncovering the mysteries of the Book of Prophecies. And he tells them all at the end, he's like, one of you is going to betray me. And the thing we still don't know is who was the traitor, who sold out the Master of Masters, who was the traitor in there. But the theory is that there never was a traitor. That he gave them all... The theory was that he gave them all contradicting roles, so they would all suspect each other of being the traitor, which would trigger the Keyblade War, which is what he needed to happen in the first place, because he told Envy, you can't stop the Keyblade War. It's going to happen. And he said, no, I'm going to stop it. And he's like, you can't stop it. And so he knew that what was going to happen, so he gave them all conflicting roles, so they would all suspect each other, which would trigger it anyway.
That's pretty baller of the Master.
Yeah, so he's been manipulating all of this from the start. So there's a character in the mobile games that's introduced, whose name is just Darkness. Like, their name is just Darkness.
I wonder what he's like.
I know, right?
Probably the most positive person you'll ever meet.
What's interesting is that the Master of Masters is always saying how he's afraid of the darkness, how he wants to stop the darkness, how we have to stop the darkness. But what if he's not talking about, like, darkness as, like, a power? He's talking about the dude, like, the guy Darkness. And we still don't know the Master of Masters' name, but he said it to Xehanort. And when he said it to Xehanort, there was a big flash of light right before he said, the truth is what you see with your eyes, not what you hear.
Damn.
So the flash of light, what if the Master of Masters' name is Light, and he's fighting against the darkness? So it's a very weird, like, situation where it's very clear the Master of Masters has been manipulating everyone to get his desired outcome. But what if his desired outcome is a good thing?
What happens if the darkness isn't the person, but it's the band?
And they just sing the I Believe in a Thing Called Love?
What happens if the entire soundtrack of the game is just the darkness's first album?
He's just trying to stop a concert from happening.
Yeah, he's like, we can't have it happen.
The darkness is visiting Japan on tour.
Yeah. Exactly. Like, what happened
the first time he went through the time loop, like, he met, like, this girl, and, like, she just, like, blew him off. And, like, the second time he went through the time loop, he got her name, but he didn't get her phone number. And he's like, all right, I just gotta keep running this through until I meet this chick, get her phone number. We meet up after the concerts. Like, I just gotta do this right this time.
It's gotta be. This is it. Him and his girlfriend were big fans of the darkness, and then he goes to the concert, and the darkness steals his girlfriend.
Whoa.
So he needs to prevent the darkness from stealing his girlfriend.
That's why he hates darkness so much.
Yeah, that's exactly why.
He no longer believes in a thing called love at that point.
Yeah, you can't, because you can't listen to the rhythm of his heart.
TJ, look at that meme I just posted.
I saw this.
Okay, so
I guess we should talk about this.
Let me set it up, and then I'll hand it off to TJ better. So for Joe and for anyone else, there is Nomura has obviously had a long, drawn-out history with Square Enix, or just when it was, Square Soft before in the 90s, like an instrumental character artist and enemy designer, boss battle designer in Final Fantasy VII. That really put him on the map as, being an important part of one of the greatest games of all time. Then they let him lead.
He did 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13. We're gonna get to what comes after 13 here in a minute, but he's also done all of Kingdom Hearts, The World Ends With You. So he's been around a while.
His, let's say, passion project, let's call it that. Others will call it a money dump or a money drain, but Nomura's passion project for a long time at Square, while he was doing 80 million other games, was a game called Final Fantasy Versus 13. Now, if you think, like Joe or anyone else, if you're like, okay, that would be related to Final Fantasy 13 with lightning and snow and, all that storyline, they made 3 games. No. This was being made before Final Fantasy 13. So it makes no sense to go from 12 to Versus 13. It's really just nonsensical what was going on, what Square Enix was allowing him to do.
It was supposed to be a companion that took place in the same universe, just with different characters.
It started development, I believe, in 2005 or 6. It was right after 12, whenever 12 was, or like right as 12 was releasing on PS2. Is when Versus 13 was starting development. And it was in development for like almost a decade until it eventually kind of got morphed into what Final Fantasy 15 ended up being with Noctis and that storyline and that gameplay. So, the character that we mentioned earlier, the silver hair guy, Yorozu, right, TJ?
Yozora.
Why do I keep messing the slots up? Sorry. Yozora. I keep messing up. Sorry. Yozora in Kingdom Hearts 3, in the video game, in that fake trailer for the fake game in the Toy Story universe that we were talking about, Joe, is Ferrum Rex is the main character of that game, and that fake trailer is essentially what the original trailer of Final Fantasy Versus 13 was back in like 2006, 2007, something like that. So clearly he is a spiritual successor to the original protagonist. There's even a shot.
The original protagonist's name was Noctis, if I'm remembering correctly.
Which is Noctis is the protagonist of Final Fantasy 15. There's a shot of Noctis in like a limousine or a car or something like that is straight up.
It's almost a shot-for-shot remake from the trailer.
Yes, from the Versus 13 when Noctis still had the silver hair or whatever trailer. Like, so this game is obviously very near and dear to Nomura's heart, and it's probably like his biggest regret in life that he never actually got to make it, because they ended up making 13 and then 13.2 and then 13.3 Lightning Returns, and it just like got put back on the shelf because he had to make Kingdom Hearts 3 and all this stuff. So if you watch this trailer and you go and watch the Versus 13 trailer, the Kingdom Hearts 4 and Versus 13, there is a lot of overlapping ideas or visuals, like the part where he's jumping through the big like square, I guess building that was being torn apart where Sora is like a recreation of the Versus 13 moment. And obviously the character is a spiritual successor to it in the Kingdom Hearts universe. So like, I wonder how much of Kingdom Hearts 4 is Nomura like finally getting to put his masterpiece into his magnum opus into a game. Now the floor is TJ's.
He's basically told Square, I'm going to make this game whether you let me or not.
Right.
Yeah. Pretty much sounds like it's happening.
Final Fantasy Versus 13 ended up becoming Final Fantasy 15, but the story was changed. The stories I've read about it were that like Square came to Nomura and said like, hey man, this game's been in development since 2006. Like, what do you got for us? And he's like, I'm still writing the story. And they're like, dude, it's been like 8 years. Like,
it's like, this is supposed to come out when 13 comes out in 2009, right? It's supposed to.
Yeah, like you can't really call it Versus 13 anymore. We're about to release 14. Like, come on, man. Like, we got to do something here. And the whole story was morphed into 15. And I guess I haven't played 15, so I don't know if it takes place in the same universe as 13.
No, it doesn't. It's completely separate.
It's. I definitely understand that like Nomura had this whole project canceled, and it canceled out from under him. It got morphed into something that he didn't want. So he's finally getting Versus 13. It's just going to be Kingdom Hearts 4.
Okay. Seems like a lot of work to do to get your game out.
I know. And I will never forget the secret ending to Remind. Joe was talking about this earlier, where Yozora is in the car. It's. I remember watching it the first time, and I'm like, this is a trailer for Versus 13. Like, what is going on? And it was like shot for shot the beginning of the Versus 13 trailer from like 2010, maybe, or it might have been 2011. The trailer, but he's been wanting this for a while, and I guess he's finally getting it.
You know, he deserves.
I don't know. I mean, he's cost Square a lot of money over the last 25 years. I don't know if he deserves.
He's also made them a lot of money. He's also made them a lot of money.
Joe, he's cost them so much money that he's actually made them more money.
No, I understand. That's
They
that's
look at
why they
Nomura
keep
and they're
him
like,
around.
they look at Nomura and they're like, man, this guy costs us like $2.8 million a year. Yeah, but he made 2.12 million, or he made like 3.9 million.
Yeah.
That's a net of like, you know, $1 million.
just
All
saying,
right, he could stay. He could stay. He could stay.
I don't think Nomura has the wiggle room that he used to back in the 2000s and early 2010s. Now, as they have other directors, they got the Final Fantasy 14 guy who's killing it, who's now working on 16.
Yep.
The guy who co-directed Final Fantasy 7 Remake with Nomura, I believe, where Nomura was there essentially as like his guardian, helping him through the process, but that guy was the main director on the project, and he's going to take over for part 2.
I
Like
think
they have
when-
other minds in charge now at Square.
He had said once Final Fantasy 15 comes out, I'm going to be dedicating everything to Kingdom Hearts. So I'm wondering if that was because Square had canceled his game out from under him and morphed it into something he didn't like anymore. And he was like, I'm already on the project. I'm just going to finish out Final Fantasy 15, and it's just going to be Kingdom Hearts from here on out for me, and maybe a couple other side projects. Like we got Neo Twooey, and obviously he's the main story writer for The World Ends With You. He's the main character designer, so... and obviously that game came out on multiple platforms. I have it on the Switch. It's on the PlayStation 4. I think it's on Xbox. I don't actually know off the top of my head.
Now, besides Kingdom Hearts, taking more of a background or supplemental role at Square, the way that Miyamoto has now at Nintendo, where he's not specifically sitting there in the room coding the jump mechanic anymore. You know what I mean? He just
he's the overarching like. Yeah, he's like the overarching story writer, the main character designer, and he's not doing anything like, like sitting there coding like lines of code. He's just writing the story. And then he just hands it off to people and it's like, yeah, make this cutscene.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get to our last discussion here, which we could all be very wrong on, which is your expected release date. Because obviously the jokes have already come in that it's going to be 2030 or 2050 or 3008 and stuff like that. Like I was talking with my friends and they're like, oh, it's going to take 10 years. And I was like, hey, this game could release anywhere from 2024 to 2074. Like we have no idea what's going to happen.
That's not wrong.
So,
I mean, even in an unrealistic scenario, that's not wrong.
What are your two thoughts? Like, when do you expect? Now, remember, just a little context before you give your answer. Think about it. The game has, in theory, been in development for at least 2.5 years because Kingdom Hearts 3 released 3 years ago, and they only had the patch job DLC. It's not like they did a whole bunch for 3 afterwards. So it's in theory been in development already for 2 to 2.5 years, but those years were pandemic years where Square had more pressing matters to focus on, like their other Final Fantasy games, and could have put this on the back burner. So that's what makes it tricky for me. So what do you guys think?
I don't know if like 2 years would be right, because they also did Melody of Memory.
But that's like it's like an engine that's like already, like you kind of just like go through the motions of it. Like they worked with the other company that makes that style game. That's not a full-fledged. That's essentially
They
like
still
a
had
to
dedicate like resources to it. Nomura still had to like write the story and like design. Well, I guess he didn't really design any characters because there's nobody new in the game. So he did have to write the story. So I would assume that probably didn't take any more than like 6 months, maybe less, because there's really not a whole lot in Melody of Memory. It's like I said earlier, there's like an hour of like new cutscenes. So even at the minimum, this game's been in development 18 months, maybe 2 years minimum. And I mean, the trailer looked really, really good. It obviously needs some like lighting and shading a little bit. It's very clear there's no like overlighting and all that.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. Like, I want to say like 2024, maybe 2025, but we were originally told Kingdom Hearts 3 was going to be like 2012.
No. In fairness, they said now in development. They did not say coming this fall. And when they announced it in 2020.
I mean, like, originally, like, after Kingdom Hearts 2 came out, like, because Nomura at the time was working on Versus 13.
Right.
And he was like, yeah, this game's only going to take, like, a couple years to make. I'll probably get started, maybe have Kingdom Hearts 3 by, like, 2012, 2013. And then, obviously, all the problems with Versus 13 came up. And then, obviously, we ended up waiting 13 years for Kingdom Hearts 3. But I don't think anything like that's going to happen. So it's hard to say, but like 24, maybe 25.
What do you think, Joe?
I'm thinking of hard 25, like mid to late 25 is when it's coming out.
Okay.
Another interesting thing, too, they didn't say what console that footage was on.
Yeah, I think it's way too early to say. To say, is it going to go on Xbox again? Or is it going to launch on the Epic Game Store instead of coming a year later to Epic? That's the other thing.
Yeah, like they didn't announce like, oh, hey, exclusively for the PlayStation. I mean, it looks like a PlayStation 5 game. Like, don't get me wrong. Like,
because they did announce Final Fantasy 16 was PlayStation exclusive in the reveal trailer.
Yes.
So this is
I mean,
the reveal
it
trailer
looks like a PlayStation 5 game. Like if they came out tomorrow and said, "Oh, hey, we forgot to put this in the trailer, but it's PlayStation 5," I'd be like, "Yeah, that makes sense." Now if they come out tomorrow and they're like, "Oh, hey, we forgot to put this. It's actually a Nintendo Switch game." I'd be like, "Whoa,
and it's on the
hold
cloud.
now.
It's on the cloud storage with the buffering and everything.
Oh God, I don't know if I can play it.
No, it's awful. It's actually
so bad.
They should be paying us to play the cloud storage version.
Like, should get a refund on my Nintendo Switch Online account.
It's truly abysmal. All right, so here's my thought on it. I've always been interested in like companies and their decisions and how they operate based off of their fiscal responsibilities and their shareholders and their stock and ownership and things. And Square, especially Square and Disney with Kingdom Hearts, is very vested in this. So the big example is the Disney contract with Square for Kingdom Hearts is they have to make one game a year. That's why you get Melody and Memories, and that's why you get 2.8 and 0.8 and the remaster of the first two games, and then the remaster of every game, and then the collection of all of the games up to Kingdom Hearts 3, and then the collection on Epic Game. Like, that's why they do that, because they have to release a new game every week. They're like, I don't know if they're like financially responsible for releasing a new Kingdom Hearts product every year. So we know 2022 is the first mobile game, which his name is escaping me, Dark Union whatever thing.
Dark
Union
Road?
Cross, whatever.
Dark
That
Road?
thing.
With the Xehanort's backstory, essentially.
Yes. We know that the second one, which is the, I have it up here, the Missing Link, has a beta for 2022, so you would assume that's going to be maybe an early 2023 mobile game is coming, and then, so that gives you 2024, 2025. Now, Square as a whole, I looked it up, and sorry if I'm boring you with this money talk. I think it is fascinating with how video game companies operate like this. Square's fiscal year ends on March 31st. So their year is April to March.
Happy birthday to me.
Happy birthday. Yeah, that's right. Your birthday was just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, my birthday's March 31st.
So,
happy birthday.
So to me, Square also has the same financial responsibility to release a large game for their stockholders every year. So that's Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy 14, or Final Fantasy Kingdom Hearts 3, or
Kingdom Hearts 3 was
7,
January of 2019.
And right, so that would still be the same fiscal year, because even though it got delayed from November to January, it's the same fiscal year that it released in. The same.
Oh wow, I forgot that game was actually delayed. Yeah.
Yes, it was delayed to 2019.
I completely forgot about that.
So the same thing with Final Fantasy 7. Or no. 7 Remake actually got delayed to the next year because it was April 20th of 2020. So
I remember 7 Remake was delayed as well.
It was supposed to be early 2020 or the end of 2019, but it got delayed. So we have on the horizon and that's important to say because Forspoken just got delayed to next year's fiscal year. It was supposed to be, excuse me, sorry for coughing. It was supposed to be a March release, remember, Joe? And it got delayed. Yeah, it got delayed to May. So this was supposed to be Forspoken's year for their big fiscal game. So that now pushes the timeline down because now that's next year's fiscal game.
Wait, but the fiscal year starts in July.
Wait, hold on. Can you hear me? Sorry, I just coughed. I don't know if I tried to cover my mic. Hello?
No, you do good. We didn't hear it.
Okay. No, Square Enix's fiscal year is March 31st.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm saying. I know, that's what I'm saying. A lot of companies do
really
July
interesting,
to June, but Square doesn't. Same with Nintendo.
And that's why you'll see a lot of the big Nintendo games are always like holiday releases.
Or March, because they're just
March is like a big one as well.
Like
March is a big one as well.
Breath of the Wild was March, right? Like
Kirby was March.
Right. So now that Forspoken has been pushed to the next fiscal year, this current one, I think that actually does affect the rest of the timeline. So Final Fantasy 16 was supposed to be a 2022 game, and we haven't heard about that game in like a year and a half. I think that gets pushed to 2023, which gives Final Fantasy 7 Remake a 2024, which would give Kingdom Hearts 4
2025. It'd be interesting because
Kingdom
Hearts 3 was January. Right, 2019, supposed to be November.
Same fiscal year.
The thing is, you would think somebody like Disney would be like, hey, we really want this as like a holiday game. Like, we really want this for like holiday. This would be a really cool thing to promote like in the parks, which, you know, Disney doesn't really do that very much for Kingdom Hearts, but they did for 3. So, so it'd be nice if like we could get like a holiday release for that, but I would be fine with like early in the year, just like when Square usually does like their big releases. When was Final Fantasy 13 or not 13 7 Remake released? What was like the final release date?
So 7 Remake released April 2020. It was supposed to be March.
So it was the first game of that fiscal year.
Correct. So the same thing that happened with Forspoken, where it was delayed from right before the cutoff to now the first big thing of the new fiscal year.
So they might be saying like, okay, well, we don't want this on, you know, we might not have something big coming down the pipe for that year, so let's push this off to the next fiscal year so we can have that to show for our fiscal year.
Yeah, I don't think it's crazy. So my guess is 2025. The only thing that changes that is if Final Fantasy 7 Remake 2 is a 2023. Then I think that pushes up Kingdom Hearts timeline a little bit.
I think it might be. I think it might happen.
Because they have been making that, you know, that would be 3 extra years. They already built the engine, right, for 7 Remake. They have the character models and stuff, so.
Yeah, they probably don't have a lot of work to do for Remake 2. So, you know, it's probably easy for them to... I mean, it's a remake, essentially, so it's not like we need to... I mean, obviously we're going to write new parts of the story and all that, but the core storyline is already written. It was written 25 years ago, or however long 7 came out.
Yeah.
So they don't have to... You know, there's not a whole lot of extra stuff. It's just Nomura with, oh, hey, I had this cool idea. Like, you know, let's put this in the game, so... obviously, Kingdom Hearts 4 being an original story is going to take a little bit longer in development than something like Final Fantasy 7 Remake, which would be... Okay, we're remaking a game that came out, you know, 20 years ago and adding, you know, a bunch of stuff to it.
So, I don't know. That's just how I would think.
It's an interesting theory. I could definitely see 2025 for the game.
The other thing I forgot to mention, the most important thing was did I text TJ this? Yeah, or we were talking in DMs about Sora's apartment and just the unbelievable. So we'll end on this. So the first thing I thought when I was watching the trailer was... I made a tweet about it. I said the first thing I thought when I saw the Cage4 trailer was how much is Sora paying in rent? Because that apartment is pretty spacious and it has a balcony. And if you look at that and you see the trailer, that's a pretty damn good, you know, spot for him. I don't know how he's making the money. So somebody actually looked it up. Our friend Megan, who was also on the podcast with us for the Kingdom Hearts 3 review episode, Megan sent me this streamer named Itaki Mochi or Audrey on Twitter. Her and her chat apparently looked through to figure out what town or what location in Japan was the Kingdom Hearts 4 area based off of. And so Sora lives in Aoyama in Tokyo, which is one of the most expensive residential areas in Tokyo. The building in the distance looks like Shibuya Stream, and I'm fairly certain the park you see is Aoyama Gakuen. Excuse me if I say it wrong. Also, this is probably his apartment, and she shows the photos of the game. I linked, I think, did I post the link in here for the Twitter? Yeah. I did? Right? Okay, yeah. So if you read that thread, she shows the in-game photos and then the real-life version of it. It is pretty good.
Yeah.
So her and her chat, she essentially doxed Sora. Like, they found out where Sora lives. And then they found the apartment. It's for 245,000 yen a month, which translated to roughly 2,000 US dollars a month. And that's for the view and the size of that place. That's a pretty good deal that Sora got for his apartment.
Yeah, no, it's pretty good, especially in.
What do we think Sora does for a living?
Well,
he's definitely a.
Oh yeah, he's only been there. Yes, as Sterlitzia says in the trailer, oh, you've been sleeping for 7 days. So yeah, he doesn't have a job yet, but it's
also,
obviously Sterlitzia's apartment.
So wild, he's a game developer for Square Enix.
Oh my god!
He shows to put the square on it. Nomura puts himself in the game as a secret boss.
Like the Game Freak buildings in Pokemon games, where the developers are there and they all hate their lives.
yeah. It's gonna be just a huge diss.
Do you remember?
That's a great idea, Joe. You have to fly to Japan right now, find Nomura on the street, and tell him to put that in the game.
I'm on it.
Because that's a genius idea.
I gotta go.
Joe, do you remember before we knew Sora was going to be in Smash Brothers? Do you remember the theory that Sakurai was just going to put himself in Smash Brothers as the final DLC character?
Yeah.
This is what this is.
That would have been way better.
No, we got Sora in Smash.
Just a large.
We also haven't talked about this yet, Joe. How does Sora being in Kingdom Hearts or in Super Smash Brothers fit into the Kingdom Hearts universe?
It will eventually. You know the Master Hand's going to be a secret
there's
DLC
gotta be
boss.
I need like a scene where like Sora reunites with Kairi and Kairi's like, oh, what did you do while you were gone? He's like, oh, I went to this world and I fought this plumber. There was like a weird mouse with like electricity and there was a giant hand. It was really weird. Like just like referencing Smash Brothers.
Was only allowed to play on Battlefield 3 stocks, timer. Like it was very weird.
You can only move in 2D. It was really weird.
or he like just pulls out his Smash invitation and he shows it to the camera and he winks and he goes, nothing, and then the game ends.
It's like tee.
Square's like, well, we had to throw that in for Nintendo. Nintendo asked.
All right, so thank you for being on this episode with us, TJ. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Where can we find you online in your streams and, in person you're going to be coming back to Pokemon events and things like that?
Yeah, so I am on Twitter at PsyJ. I tweet about speedrunning, Pokemon stuff. I am on Twitch at twitch.tv/psy_J, PSY_J. I stream every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. Mostly speedrunning stuff. Sometimes I'll do like a Let's Play because the new Kirby game came out and I really wanted to play that, so I played that on stream. But mostly I do speedrunnings. I'm kind of currently doing Let's Go speedruns right now. Working on all obtainable Pokemon. We catch all 135 Pokemon in the game in about 6 hours, actually. So it's pretty fun. If you guys are going to be in Germany in 2 weeks, I will be there for the European International Championships.
Ooh.
So I'll be flying out here on the 19th. So in about 9 days. Can't wait to sit in a tin can for 10 hours. Didn't miss that for 2 years. 2 weeks after that, I will be in Indianapolis. I will be the head judge for juniors and seniors VGC in Indianapolis. And then hopefully 2 weeks after that, I will be in your neck of the woods, Joe, in New Jersey.
Yeah.
For the New Jersey Regional Championship.
Gonna be a good time. Hopefully Joe can make it.
Hopefully we can take like a trip down to the city. We can my plan, I want to go to the Nintendo World Store.
All right, well, rent a car because I'm not taking the subway because our friend
No,
almost got stabbed on the subway yesterday.
my aunt lives in New York, and I remember I stayed with her because I was up in New York at the end of the year, and I came out, and they were all getting in the car, and I was like, "Hey, should I bring like a backpack, like just to have like things to carry?" And he's like, "I mean, you can." He's like, "We're gonna drive everywhere." I'm like, "Wait, this is New York. Like, aren't we gonna take like a bus or like a subway? Like, isn't everything like really close together?" And he just looked at me and he's like, "You really are from Florida." And I was like, I don't understand. He's like, "Nobody who lives in New York takes the subway." I'm like, "Then who takes the subway?" He's like, "Nobody."
That.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
There's a wrinkle of truth, but it's not fully.
He's like,
true.
no. Well, I think he was implying that like nobody who lives in New York willingly takes the subway.
Right,
Like
you
you
take
have
if
to
you
be
have
like,
to.
I gotta get downtown. I gotta get to my 9 to 5. Where if you're just going to New York City, you like walk down the stairs to the subway and you're like, ew, this place is gross.
Yeah,
All
pretty
right.
much.
So thank you, TJ. Joe, let's
Of
close
course,
it out.
anytime.
All right. Thank you for joining us. Thank everybody for joining us for our latest episode of Cup of Joe's. I've been your host, Joe Perry, and accompanied by my best friend, Joe Brown, and our guest, TJ, that he told us where he could find us all over the internet a few minutes ago. And we'll see you on the next episode of Cup of Joe's. Bye!